All right, in this video, I'm going to talk about making the transition from a professional services business, whether you're IT services, ergonomic therapy, accounting, whatever, to a tech-enabled service and then eventually a SaaS product. I know that this is a common goal that a lot of founders I talk with have, and I've spoken with several founders that have actually launched their own SaaS products, and I've started to see some patterns in what's working and what's not working, and what I think the solutions are to different challenges and the three main pitfalls that founders run into when they're going through this process. So I'm going to start off with describing kind of the life cycle and what the transition looks like. Then I'll talk about the three pitfalls and then what I think the solutions are for those challenges. All right. So starting off, we have here a professional services business, right? You're running a company that has a contract value, probably, I'm assuming it's a B2B service. You're probably running between, contract value on the low end of like 5,000 all the way up to 500,000 if you're like, custom development, custom software development, maintenance for large organizations, things like that. And relatively high margin, right? So we're talking here on the services that you're building out, depending on if it's just you and a small team or if you really scaled up your team, could have a 40 to 60% gross margin. I know for staffing, sometimes that can go to like 15 to 20%, really slim because they're operating at a higher scale. But just as a general ballpark here, 40 to 60% gross margin, running probably a 10 to 30% EBITDA. That's kind of like the benchmarks range that I see. Obviously, it's slower to scale because you're always trying to match your internal capacity to the contracts that you're signing. And the sales process here is more based on reputation, authority, trust, referrals, right? That kind of stuff. If you are professionalizing your growth and your acquisition here, you're probably investing a lot of time in marketing, in content marketing, conferences, right? Webinars, partnerships, that kind of stuff. Maybe a little bit of strategic outreach, but it's less likely that pure cold calling is working for you here. It's more like building your awareness in a target market that you've selected, whether it's a vertical, a horizontal use case that you solve, whether you're a HubSpot integration partner or Salesforce or other ERP or CRM or implementation partner. You've kind of picked your lane and you stick to it. Here, so then usually it's a few years before you're really thinking about doing a tech-enabled service. Maybe you had the idea early on, but generally I see it's a few years. On the high end, I've seen people that are decades into their career and they're finally launching a software product because they've identified a need, they've built this thing internally, and they've managed to commercialize it to some extent, or they want to commercialize it. Here, your fulfillment is more streamlined, so you've either managed to cobble together some pieces of off-the-shelf or custom software, or you've made something custom internally, either using your own in-house team if you're a tech company or if you're an IT services company, or you've outsourced an element of that through an agency or freelancers. This approach makes you more scalable. You probably have an improvement in your margins without really having a hit on your average contract value, meaning that you can keep your prices the same and you just have more optimizations, or you can service more clients with the same headcount without having to increase your team size. So here you see the office is getting, there's a mix of robots and people there, AI generated images. And then finally, typically shortly after that, you want to transition to a SaaS product. So you've seen the benefits of having more technology in your process and your client delivery, your service fulfillment. And now you're thinking, okay, maybe there's a way that we can actually commercialize this product. Typically, you're going to see that your ACV will be a little bit on the lower end on the minimum and a little bit on the lower end on the maximum as well. So an ACV of like 1 to 50K. Again, these are just general ballparks. There are exceptions, right? But that's just the general range that I see. Virtually no fulfillment, right? Maybe a little bit of customer support or customer service. Usually it's still tied to some of your service elements, right? You might have someone that's doing the service, also doing the customer support here. Gross margin now is well over 80%, EBITDA of 20 to 50% if you're treating it just as a business unit for what you're doing there, and a very scalable business model, obviously, right? So that's why you're striving for this. Here, you see almost no people, just the robot running the office. Again, it's crazy what you can do with AI generated images. All right, so the three key challenges that I see firm owners running into time and time again when they're trying to, they have launched a product or they're trying to launch a product, they're trying to make that transition. It's that they're not clear on the objectives of the product. So here I hear things like the product is my retirement plan, or sometimes it's not. Sometimes the service business is large enough that that's the retirement plan. They can sell it for a 3 to 5 times multiple. So you can get out and cash in a few million or whatever at the end of your career. And then that's kind of your retirement plan. Other times people want to launch the product to enable the growth of the services branch, right? That's kind of like that tech-enabled service phase, like kind of phase 2 of the life cycle. And another one is, I heard this recently and I like this one a lot. It's a strategic acquisition. They're looking to make something that gets acquired by a company, by a technology company in their space. And the reason they wanted it was not really for the money. It's funny that this founder was telling me, he's like, my services business will be my, it's my 401k, right? It's my RRSP plan, it's my retirement plan. But he was doing it for legacy. He wanted to change the industry and make the technology available that he'd been using in his business. He wanted to make it available to everybody in the business and just lift the quality of service delivery among all the competing firms. And for him, it was more about leaving a mark in his industry than it was about making a bunch of money, which I thought was really interesting. So, the big thing is you want to get clear on what your objectives are, because if you're not clear, then you're not going to know how much you're ready to invest or what channels might work or how far you're willing to go with this product, right? So you have to decide, is it just to enhance my services? Is it to get acquired? Is it to be my retirement plan? Is it to be a lifestyle business so you can go sailing around the world, right? What are you trying to actually achieve with this spin-off product that you're making, right? So that's the first thing. The second challenge is resource allocation and prioritization. So I really often see that people will, service business owners will want to invest like 50 or 100K in building the product, but then no budget for marketing and sales. They think it'll just sell itself because they have these relationships and this this authority in their industry already. Typically, I find that whatever you've built up in terms of your services business, the goodwill, the brand awareness, all that, doesn't have much carryover or much strength in the product side of things. So as much as people might like you and your team, they might love you guys and you have great relationships, oftentimes you'll still be compared to competing solutions, and people won't just buy based purely on brand or purely on the trust that you have. They might give you a trial based on that, but for them to continue to invest in your solution month after month, year after year, renewing, it'll have to really be better than the competition, or at least matching the quality of the competition. So then your brand kind of makes the differentiating decision of, hey, you know what, for the same price, we can support these guys that we've been working with for years. Let's go with them. That's a no-brainer in that case. But if you can't expect to launch a less complete product than the competition and have everyone buy just because of your brand on the services branch. That's a common thing. So you gotta have a realistic budget for sales and marketing. Oftentimes there's a challenge also from making a transition as it's treated as just an internal project or a side project to being its own company, its own branded, separate website, separate corporate structure, right? And also your staffing needs are different, right? The people that are gonna run the SaaS branch are not always the people that were running the services branch and then can just transition. It's a different set of skills. There's different needs for customer service and fulfillment. There's different needs for ops, right? For DevOps and R&D and managing everything, right? So there are different KPIs, and like literally everything about it is different. So that's something to keep in mind. And then finally, the product market fit and the sales process. A lot of people think that their product, just because they built it because they really understand the market, they think that it'll transfer perfectly and be a sellable product. But the reality is that services, right, are, by their nature, services are done for you. It's, you pay me a certain amount of money, I will do this thing for you, you get this outcome. And humans have a lot easier grasp on paying large fees for that, because you can understand, you have an accountant that you pay $200 an hour, a lawyer you pay $400 an hour. You have all these service providers in your business that you pay a high hourly rate, so it's logical to be okay paying for services, and especially when you're getting a done for you outcome. Where the copy and paste kind of fails is when people think, okay, well, people are paying me right now for my consulting on this thing. They would also pay me, instead of paying me $10,000 for my consulting, they might pay me, $1,000 to get a tool that lets them do it themselves. The reality is that the customers you've been selling to want everything done for them. They don't necessarily want the product. They might pay for the product to be built into the services to save money on having less hours or smaller services contracts. It might make sense for them, but they're still buying a done for you approach. So the people that you're selling to are different. So now you have a different persona that you have to sell to. So your pricing, your funnels, your KPIs, they're all going to be different. And then same thing is, you have to think about the sales process for a services engagement. Selling a $500,000 custom software development engagement or database migration project is completely different than selling a $25,000 SaaS. Again, you actually might find that ironically, it's easier to sell the larger services engagement than to sell the $25,000 SaaS that requires a bunch of onboarding and training and behavior change in the company, versus like, hey, give us access to your database, and 3 months later, you're going to get a fully migrated database or a custom piece of software that just needs a few approval meetings or review meetings, right? So there's a big difference there, and a lot of companies or a lot of founders don't think about that. So the solutions here are essentially, for the first one, whether the objectives of the product, essentially you want to get really clear on why you're doing it. And one of the pitfalls here is that these kinds of projects can be a black hole for money and time and energy and focus, right? And as an entrepreneur, your key resource is your attention and your focus and where you're investing it. So if you think about that, you have to get really, because if you don't set really clear kill criteria at the start of the project, you run the risk of being in the day-to-day or in the middle of a quarter and thinking, well, I know I said that by this date we would, have at least this much revenue, but we're almost there and we're just figuring it out. You can end up investing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands more in trying to make this product work and commercialize it instead of being realistic about where it should be. So essentially what you want to do is at the start, you want to set a goal, like you want to set like a top end goal of like, hey, here's our stretch goal. We want to be at 200K ARR by the end of the year, but we're going to kill the project if by the end of the year, we're going to give ourselves 12 months, but if by the end of the year we're not at least at 50K ARR, we're going to consider that this project has failed and that we weren't able to find product market fit, and we are not going to invest any more money. We'll just either sunset it or let it just kind of operate on its own. And if it ever takes off, it does, and if not, whatever. Or maybe we try to find an acquirer. So be clear on what happens when the kill criteria are met and you're going to kill the project, and then be clear on what the actions are after that. So that's the big thing, is to set a hard deadline and write it down. Don't just say it in a meeting, because then it's too easy to keep stretching it out. Write it down somewhere and review it on a regular basis, quarterly or annual basis, to see if you're there or not. Then the other thing is, if you're launching it as a standalone product, I see a lot of founders that think that, again, it's just going to be able to sell itself through their existing network. You have to treat it as an actual investment. So imagine that you were buying this company, right? And you were, the company, the product was zero revenue, and you're being asked to invest in it. Treat it as an investment, right? Treat it as, we're going to put 100K or 500K into this product, and we want to see a return on investment. Don't just treat it as, well, maybe it eventually will take off. You're better off just treating it as an internal tool then, and not trying to split it off as its own company at that point. And the second thing is, the staffing needs and the KPIs and everything will be completely different. The go-to-market strategy will be different. The type of teammates you need will be different, and the metrics that you're going to track for performance for a SaaS product versus a services engagement will be much different, right? Just one example. In a services company, typically you have a backlog of services built up, of projects that you have to deliver. That's a KPI that you can measure, is backlog or months of KPI. In a SaaS product, it'll be sales pipeline, but no one's going to prepay for it. Well, it's rare that you can. Sometimes you can. I'm gonna correct that. Sometimes you can get prepaid contracts if you have like some kind of a breakup option where people can get their money back, like a deposit, right, to build out an MVP. But for the most part, people aren't going to pay for a software that they can't access today or in the next month or so, right? So that's a key difference that you have to think about. So you want to make sure that you're getting people who are actually experienced in SaaS, and that might not be anyone at your company. You might have to go and actually recruit and build an MVP or a V1 team, or use agencies or freelancers or things like that to staff the project and get things off the ground. So that's it. Those are the three key things, right? Make sure, get clear on why you're doing it, set kill criteria, launch it as a standalone product, treat it as an actual investment and not just a side project, and make sure that you staff the project with people who actually have experience in SaaS if you're going to build your own SaaS product and branch off from the services side of your company. All right, good luck.